I'm your host, Kea Keolanui, and today we have the honor of interviewing prosecuting attorney and mayoral candidate, Mitch Roth. Aloha, Mitch.
Aloha, Kea.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
We're excited to have you in the studio because we really want to know the man behind the name on the nomination papers. Let's start easy from the beginning. Can you give us a snapshot of your childhood and your parents? Do you have siblings?
I do have siblings. I have an older sister, an older brother, and a younger brother. And when I was 4 years old, my mom and dad got divorced. And my mom, was pretty much a working mom that would work, 12-hour days. And so I was what was known back then as a latchkey kid, where I'd come home. And so I was kind of the early days. Went through half of high school, then dropped out. Your typical lawyer story.
Wow.
Got a job working at a little mom and pop shop that nobody's ever heard of. Again, the boss decided he was going to put his name on all the products, and I knew that place was going nowhere. So at 17, I left that little mom and pop shop called Trader Joe's. Like I said, nobody's ever heard of that again. And with $200, I ended up flying to Hawaii with a one-way ticket and a couple of friends, and the rest is history.
Wow, amazing. And where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Los Angeles area. And like I said, until I was about 17, I came to Hawaii.
Beautiful. Do you have any hidden talents?
Hidden talents, not really. I think if I had one hidden talent, I think I'm pretty good at solving problems.
Okay, great. This question is from Kiana Ramirez. What's the scariest thing you've ever done?
The scariest thing I've ever done, I think when I was about 16 years old, I was rappelling off of a mountain. And when you have rappelling, you have the cords that go behind you. And I was not wearing a shirt because, 16, you have magic thinking, you don't think you're going to get hurt. And I was about 75 feet up, and as the cord went behind my back, it started burning my back. And I took the cord from behind my back and put it in front, and that was literally the scariest thing I think I've ever done.
Ooh, that sounds like a very close one.
Yeah.
So what are some of your hobbies, Mitch?
Well, one of my hobbies I love is I love to play golf. I like to do gardening when I have time. And I just like to learn about things, learn and try new things. And, hiking, outdoors. That's one of the hobbies I have.
Great. So you mentioned that you are a high school dropout. Can you tell us a little bit more about your schooling?
Well, so after I came to Hawaii, so I dropped out in about the 10th grade. After I came to Hawaii, I was able to get a job working in an art gallery in Honolulu. And those people took me in and kind of hanai'd me as their family. And about after a year, they told me I've gone as far as I'm going in that gallery without an education, and they wanted me to go to school. And that was kind of a scary thing for me to think about going through school. And but I had someone that basically gave me some really good advice. While I was working at the gallery, I got to drive around some of the artists, and we had some really famous artists that I got to kind of take care of, one of which was a person by the name of Skelton, who you probably don't know, but probably the most famous comedian of his times in the 50s and 60s. And I was driving Skelton around, and I told him about this going to school, and told him I was kind of a little bit worried about it. And he said, "Son, let me tell you a story. When I was a young man, I ran away from home and I joined the circus. And I became a clown, and I became pretty famous and had some opportunities, and had this opportunity to go into vaudeville. And I came home and I told my mom, and she said, 'Son, don't mess with success.' And from vaudeville, I had an opportunity to go into like radio and movies and television. And every time my mom said, 'Son, don't mess with success.'" He said, "Now listen here, son. Sometimes you have to mess with success to get ahead in life." And with that, I got into the University of Hawaii on academic probation and graduated on academic scholarships.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Well, that's an inspiration to so many high school dropouts and, anyone that needs a little motivation to get ahead in their life.
I had some other people that also told me lessons that I love to give to high school kids, and that is whatever the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And that's a Napoleon Hill quote, and I really live by that. If you can think of it, if you can believe it, if you can see yourself doing it, you can achieve it if you just put enough work into it.
That's a great way to live by.
I think so. Thanks, Kea.
Yeah, of course. So what are some of the jobs that you've had? You mentioned you worked for Trader Joe's when they were just a small mom and pop shop. And then you went into the gallery. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about your professional career and the jobs that you've had?
Well, starting off when I was 13, I had a paper route. So I've had paper routes, worked in Trader Joe's. When I came over, I worked for a place called Center Art Galleries. And when I started through college, I worked through a luau called Germain's Luau. I was a tour escort, so we'd take the tourists out to Campbell Industrial on Oahu, and we'd bring them back, and they'd be all drunk, and so we'd sing songs and tell jokes. And I worked for a restaurant as a waiter. I worked for Bobby McGee's.
Really?
And so I had a couple of costumes that I would wear, and costume waiters. Those are great jobs.
What kind of costumes, Mitch?
So typecasting. I was Officer Billy Club, and so I'd have an Irish accent, and we would do some fun stuff at Bobby McGee's. I'd take silverware, I'd put it up my sleeve and shake people down. The silverware would come out, and people wouldn't. They'd go there to not only have food but to have a good time. After I graduated from college, I went to Japan and I taught English for 3 years.
Wow.
And that's where I met my wife. And the idea when I was living in Japan and teaching English is that I would come back to Japan because I could speak some Japanese and I'd make lots of money as a international attorney. But when I went to law school in LA, we had the Rodney King riots, and I saw what was going on there. And I tried to do what I could to help, and I offered, to volunteer for the police and the sheriffs to, show videos to the people about, people who are looting, and they told me that they weren't going to do those things. And I quickly learned that common sense and government don't really go together all the time. So while I was working at the LA City Attorney, we were doing the very first semblances of community prosecution, which is building partnerships to solve problems. And so I did that. I really enjoyed that. Had the opportunity after graduating from law school to come back to Hawaii, and I worked as a deputy prosecutor in Honolulu.
Wow, that's amazing. Very amazing background that you have. I really like the story about the dress-up waiter and the singing tour guide.
Maybe I'll sing to you later.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay.
So, fast forward, it's 1993. What are you doing?
Now in Honolulu as a deputy prosecuting attorney. So I started in the traffic division and then did domestic violence and Hon Crim, went up to the felony division and did felony cases. But I also started something called community-oriented prosecution in Honolulu. It's building partnerships to solve problems and learning about how to be a problem solver, how to train people to be problem solvers, how to work with the community and get the community to do things. And I had got this grant to do community-oriented prosecution, and we started the Weed and Seed site in Honolulu, and that was my project over there. Weeded out crime and seeded in positive social change. And it was kind of not very comfortable, but I got a call one day from Jay Kimura, who was the prosecutor here, asking if I would be willing to come over to the Big Island and do community-oriented prosecution. And so without even knowing how much I was getting paid, I said absolutely. I told my wife, and Rico was like, "You're doing what?" And it was the best decision that I have ever made in my life. First of all, working for Jay was great. He gave me a lot of authority to make decisions, and so we started working on domestic violence. We did our Weed and Seed site in Pahoa, which became one of the most successful weed and seed sites in the country. And through that, I was teaching also problem solving for a community policing institute out of Oregon that handled various states. I was able to teach problem solving to police and to communities throughout the United States. And so I really honed my skills on problem solving and teaching problem solving and learning how to engage the community and get the right people working together to make positive change.
So as deputy prosecutor, what else did you do?
So other than working on the domestic violence issues and the weed and seed, I focused on community-oriented prosecution, which again was building partnerships. And so we helped bring things like VASH, which is the Visitors Aloha Society of Hawaii, to Hawaii Island. And it's kind of funny, when we started working on that, people told us that there's not going to be enough cases because we take care of tourists who are victims of crimes or other traumatic incidences. And I think last year on this island, VASH helped about over 1,000 people who had traumatic incidences, whether they were crime or it was somebody dying and drowning, or someone getting, something happening on a cruise ship or something like that. And that was pretty cool because they do random acts of aloha. I've been able to work on programs such as Shattered Dreams, the high school initiatives on drinking and driving, where we educate them about that, help create things like the CERT, the Citizens Emergency Response Teams, the first responders before the first responders are there. I handled the asset forfeiture program, which is the law enforcement's extra tool rather than just putting people in custody. And so I had a lot of different projects that I worked with a lot of different groups to work on, and I handled some cases too. In the meantime, it's always fun to handle cases and do the work that most people think of as the prosecutors do.
Wow, great. So can you talk a little bit more about how you went from deputy prosecutor to prosecuting attorney?
So there came a time when J. Kimura decided he wasn't going to run, and he was the prosecutor. The first deputy was Charlene Boshi, and she decided she wasn't going to run, and so that opened up a position. And I decided after a meeting with a friend of mine, Lincoln Ishida, who ran for prosecutor, that I had to run. And it was something that he said in a meeting that just didn't sit right. As this was happening, I went through this really kind of crazy time where I had some fear, and it brought me back to a time when I was in Honolulu, where I had made some beer. I was handing these 2 bottles of beer over to a friend, and all of a sudden the beers exploded. And my friend got this cut above his eyes, and when you get a cut up there, you bleed a lot. And we were outside in the dark, and I put my hands to my face, and I said, "Oh my God!" And I went to inside because there was another person that was helping him, called an ambulance. And as I walked in, I pulled my hand away from my face and had a red plastic glove of blood on my arm, and all of a sudden I was on the ground, and my friend, who was a police officer, was holding me, saying, "Oh my God, your face is all shredded up."
Oh no.
And then he said, "Don't move, you have a piece of glass in your neck." And so they took me to the hospital. They stitched me up, and about 100 stitches. But before they did that, they took the x-rays, and the doctor came and said, "Whatever you do, don't move. You got a piece of glass in your neck, and it's resting against your carotid artery. Is there a next of kin?" And that's the worst thing to tell somebody. And for doctors out there, that's the worst thing you can tell somebody. So I just said, "God, just please take care of my wife and kids." My son was just born, and I felt this feeling come through my body and says, "I got you, everything's going to be okay." And so when I told Lincoln I was going to run against him, I had that same feeling, and I heard the same voice saying, "I got you, everything's going to be okay." And so I just kind of knew that that was the right thing for me to do. And we won the election after we got to the primaries. And this is kind of a funny story. There was 3 people in the primaries, and the way it works is that there's more than 50% of the votes, you win the election. And so the first vote comes out, and John Burnett from Tribune Herald calls and says, "Well, have you given your concession speech yet?" And I said, "John, the night's still early, and we still have faith." The second round comes in and says, "Well, Mitch, you're obviously too far behind. Have you at least thought about what you're going to say in your concession speech?" And I said, "John, the night's still early, and we still have faith." And the third tally came in, and by 17 votes, we were in the race. We were thousands of votes behind, but we were in the race. And it was, we went to the generals, and in the generals we were behind, and we were able to win the race by about 124 votes out of, I think it was over 60,000 that were cast. So
wow,
pretty close thing, but when you have faith, anything is possible.
Wow.
And I think that's a message that people need to also have out there, is that as long as you're doing the right thing, as long as you're acting with integrity, and it doesn't really matter what the outcome is. There's a different purpose.
Wow.
A higher purpose, I should say.
So what is the main role of prosecuting attorney?
So the main role of the prosecuting attorney, it's kind of like a referee. I guess this is the best way. You play soccer, so if you're offside, the referee pulls the card. The prosecutor is the guy that enforces the rules generally, or the girl that enforces the rules. Someone breaks the law, the police go out, they investigate. The prosecutor's job is to enforce the law. And we bring the case, we're there to do justice. The judge makes the decision on what the sentence is going to be, but our job is to make sure that justice is done. The way we've done things, and the way I look at the job of the prosecutor, is to improve the quality of life in our community and to make our community a safer and healthier place. And our office operates on a different kind of wavelength than most prosecutors traditionally work. Because if we just looked at cases and we just saw this whole thing with the jails, we know that our jails have been overfull for the last 8 years, and so people would complain that, why aren't you doing more? Well, I don't build the jails, I don't get to decide. We put as many people as we can in jail. It's public safety and others to decide how, and the judges how many people are going to keep in jail. Our job is to do justice, to try to do those things. But we also realize that if your only tool is a hammer, all your problems are nails. And you cannot arrest your way out of this. You cannot jail your way out of this. And so as the prosecutor, we also looked at being proactive and figuring out ways that we could reduce recidivism, improve the quality of life. And so for example, we've done a lot of work on juvenile justice. And the way I like to talk about juvenile justice is to look upstream. So if you have people that are coming down the stream filling up the jails, they start someplace, and generally they're going to start with our kids. In Hawaii, we have the Hawaii Youth Correctional Facility, HYCF. A lot of people don't realize this, but it costs us about $200,000 per kid per year to lock a kid up there. And 75% of them are going to enter the adult system as criminals. So that's a 25% success right now when you went to school. And for the kids out there, 25%, you get a 30, you're doing better than the state's doing. So we said that's crazy, that's not working. And so we started looking at building assessment centers. So we've worked with the Salvation Army, and we have the Big Island Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center. We started things like working with restorative justice, working with offenders and victims, and having a mediator kind of decide what the penalties are going to be, what the consequences are going to be. With those programs, it costs less than $1,000 per kid, and our success rate has been somewhere around 95%.
Wow.
Recidivism has been very low, and we decided we're going to count recidivism differently than they count it on the state system. The state system, you have to have a felony conviction. Any police contact, we're counting as recidivism. So we had a child who got into trouble. We did a restorative justice, and then she got in trouble again for sexting. Not a big crime, but there was police contact, so we counted that as recidivism. In the last 8 years, we've been able to reduce juvenile crime by over 50%. We've started helping to support programs such as Camp Agape. Camp Agape is a camp put on by churches for kids whose parents are incarcerated, because we know that those kids are going to enter the criminal justice system if you don't put something in the way. And so by putting some structure in their way, by putting people in front of them that show them love and appreciation, that a lot of problems with kids is if you're telling a kid 10 things that they're doing wrong, and one time out of that 10 you may say something positive, the kid's going to start to believe that they're not good, they're stupid, they're whatever those things that you're putting in. But if you change that around and show them that, you know, they are good. Kids are, you know, inherently good, but what happens oftentimes with their families and their situations and the people that they hang around with, they turn bad. So we've tried to work on reducing the likelihood of entering into the justice system by looking at the roots of crime. Another one is domestic violence. We know that domestic violence is big. So we, rather than just prosecuting people, we've tried to look at how we can make an impact on the front end so the back end isn't hurting us. Every dollar of prevention, well, every dollar for putting someone in a prison, it's like $11 on prevention. So you get 11 to 1 benefits by doing prevention over just locking people up. You have to lock some people up, and you have to have the space to do that. But that's not the solution for every problem. And so when people say, what does the prosecutors do? We try to make our community a safer and healthier place.
Well, thank you so much from our community and myself. You know, thank you for all that you've done as prosecuting attorney. We really are very appreciative of you. What would you say the most challenging and rewarding parts are of being prosecuting attorney?
You know, I think some of the most challenging parts of being the prosecutor is you have limited resources. And, you know, right now, for example, our jail situation. People are frustrated because we can't put people in jail. And so, you know, it's challenging because they look and say, well, how come you're not putting these people in jail? And I try to explain, you know, for the last 8 years, we've had 400 people in a place that's been set for 200. And so if you have a glass full of water and you pour the water and it's full, it doesn't matter how big the pitcher is, the water is going to flow over. And that's kind of what's been happening in our system. And so it's really caused us to think outside the box. And so one of the biggest challenges is trying to deal with a system that isn't fit for the problems that you have. So part of the rewards is, well, I think the biggest rewards is when you help a victim of crime or a family of a victim of crime reach justice. And justice is really a difficult thing for people to grasp because it looks different to everybody. Yeah. Some of the other great, you know, things that for me personally is seeing some of the initiatives that we've done that have made huge differences. You know, one of the things that people bring up is, you know, the lava. Where were you on the lava? Well, one of the groups that I was able to start was a faith leaders initiative, and when the lava outbreak started to happen, we brought our faith leaders together and we said, look, we know that everybody's going to want to feed, but there's, you know, if everybody feeds and you're going to throw away a lot of foods, what else can faith do? And so in addition to feeding over 60,000 meals, they provided over $10,000 in laundry. They provided entertainment. They provided childcare. They provided just manpower. They provided all these different services. And for me, just being that part, I was lucky to be in the beginning and saying, hey, look, let's get together and do this. But they were able to take those things. So
that's awesome. So this is an election year for prosecuting attorney, correct?
It is.
Right.
And mayor.
And mayor.
Yes.
So do you have a message for the next prosecuting attorney?
Oh boy. You know, I think the path that we've started on is a really good path. And again, we're not going to be able to put everybody in jail. And so you have to think outside the box and to focus on the roots of crime. And one of the biggest roots of crime is going to be domestic violence, childhood trauma, because we know when there's childhood trauma and domestic violence, other crimes follow through this. Kids coming from homes of domestic violence, 6 times more likely to commit suicide than kids not coming from homes of domestic violence, 24 times more likely to be involved with sex assault, 60 times more likely to be involved with drugs or other kinds of crimes, and 100 times more likely to be involved with domestic violence. That's not saying that they're going to be 100%, only 3% of the kids coming from homes will be part of those statistics.
Wow.
But those 3% will make up over 90% of the people you're putting in prison. So you have to look at the roots and go after those things.
So before we jump into political questions, tell us about your decision to run for mayor. 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 We hear there are 19 people who have, what do you call it, pulled their papers. What does it mean?
What does it mean? Well, for me, it's interesting because I could have looked at running for prosecutor, and I think I wouldn't have had very much of a problem doing that. I look at what's happening in our community. I saw a lot of problems, and I see a lot of things that need to be fixed, and I'm a problem solver. That's what I love doing. I love solving problems, and I love this community, and I think really we need to fix the direction of where we're going, and really we need to get our community more involved in solving some of these problems.
So 19 people seems like a lot. Why do you think so many people are running for mayor this year?
I think probably the biggest reason why so many people are running is a lot of people see there's a lot of problems with the direction that we've been going in, and we need change.
Yes, we do. As mayor, what geographical area would you be in charge of overseeing? So
the mayor of this island is the mayor of the entire island, and that's really important for people in Kona, Ka'u, Kohala, Waimea, Honokaa, not just Hilo and Puna. It's the entire island, and this island has a lot of challenges in every district, and so the mayor will have the whole island. It's the entire island.
Wow, that's a big responsibility.
It is a big responsibility.
What are the main job duties as mayor? And it's a 4-year position, correct?
It is a 4-year position. The mayor, the real job of the mayor is he oversees 17 departments that function on this island, and those departments are in charge of things that are county. There's other departments on this island that are state, and the mayor has to make sure that he's in his lane dealing with the things that need to be taken care of. So, for example, our roads and our infrastructure, that is a mayor job. Our landfills and water and those things are things that come under the mayor. Research and development, public works, our planning department, parks and recreation. Those are the things that the mayor oversees.
Would you say this is a particularly important election?
I think this is a very important election, especially in light of what's happening with the coronavirus and COVID-19, the reduction in the state budget. We just saw $41 million is coming off of the county budget. You're going to need to have somebody as mayor that's going to be able to think differently than the way we've always done things, because if we do things the way we've always done things, we're not going to be able to afford it. We're spending more money on government now than we've ever have. We cannot afford to do that next year. As a matter of fact, we have $41 million less next year.
Wow.
So we have to start thinking differently. We have to start using new ideas that have been used other places successfully, because if not, it's not going to work.
How has COVID-19 changed your approach to your campaign?
Well, COVID-19 really dramatically changed everybody's approaches to campaign. What we saw prior to the COVID-19 breakout is we knew that our healthcare providers were already short on this island. We're short about 40-something% of healthcare workers. And if we had a large breakout like they had in most of the United States, that would have really quickly overwhelmed our healthcare providers. And so we decided that we are going to try to follow the rules. We're going to try to get people to realize how dangerous this virus is, and rather than try to make this about Mitch Roth running for mayor, we were going to do everything we could to help our community in the places where they were. So, we've helped with feedings. Our campaign bought face masks. We've got 3,000 face masks to give away to people. So we've donated those to hospitals, to places like Hope Services and Going Home Consortium, people that may not be able to get masks, but it was important to make sure that those people had masks because they can get sick and they can, overwhelm the healthcare providers as well. We started focusing on getting information out about who was doing great things, and there was a lot of people that are doing great things out there. I like to talk about Boys and Girls Club, partly because I sit on their board. They're feeding about 800 people a day.
Wow.
Meals that, Monday through Friday. BISAC, Big on Substance Abuse Council, Hope Services. There's so many people that are doing really great things. And then there's just individuals who are giving of themselves, volunteering their time. So for us, it wasn't about, I'm going to run a campaign and try to get people to vote for me so much as let's go out and help. We changed to doing things like our Facebook Live, taking questions like this. And so there's a lot of people that are worried. A lot of people want answers. And so we've tried to answer the questions that we can, kind of like this. Let people know what's out there. And, we're starting to come out of this. I have a real good feeling for our island. Our state is some of the lowest numbers per capita.
Yeah.
So we will come out of this, we will be fine, and now we can start maybe thinking about running a campaign and try to get people to vote. But our focus has been, let's help people, because that's really what I think the mayor has to do, is he has to help this island heal.
Great. So you're already stepping up.
Well, trying to.
All right.
I think there's a lot of people doing this, though.
Wonderful. What values will guide your administration?
So, I think the biggest thing is you have to treat people with respect. You have to have integrity. When people, as a prosecutor, let me just say it this way, as a prosecutor, every new person that started in my office, I gave them the same speech, and that is, I expect you to treat people the way you want your family members treated. Not the way you want to be treated, but the way you want your family members treated. So, if I treated you one way and I treated your father or mother a different way, you'd probably be more upset if I treat your father or mother poorly. And so I tell people it goes for the people in the office, it goes for our victims, it goes for our witnesses, but it also goes to defendants and their defense attorneys. That doesn't mean they get a special deal, but if your family member was being prosecuted, how would you want them to be treated? With dignity and respect, fairly and honestly. And that's how I've run the prosecutor's office. That's how the values I'd bring as mayor: treat people with dignity and respect, open honestly.
Those are very important values.
Thank you.
The county budget keeps growing and growing. This year is the largest in history. Tell us about your approach to budgeting.
It's interesting. As a prosecutor, every year we were told that we're going to either have to cut like 5%, 10%, whatever, or it's going to be a status quo. And so there was never a year where they said, okay, we're going to give you all this different things. However, in the last 8 years, I've been able to start programs and do some amazing things, not so much with county funds, but we've went out and we've looked for money elsewhere. So we've brought in millions of dollars, several millions of dollars over several different grants successfully, being proactive and going after that. I think the next mayor is going to have to do a better job in looking for grants, finding monies, finding different opportunities, looking at things that have been done elsewhere successfully. I give you an example. The way our bus runs and the way it runs on Maui and on Oahu are different. And we can do things differently here and maybe pay less money to do that and have a better product. We just have to think outside the box. And one of the problems I think government has, whether it's budget or anything else, we kind of have this thing of, we've always done it this way. And I like to ask the question, the Dr. Phil question, that is, how's that working for you? And if it's not, then you think about something different. Our procurement contracts, I think we need to look at, and we need to think from a different angle. I just bought a whole bunch of computers, which we got from grants this last year, 60 or 70 computers. And I realized that because of the procurement contracts and procurement rules that we have in this county, we're paying more than I could have bought a single computer on Amazon.
Wow.
And so I think, procurement contract is a contract. You negotiate the terms of the contract and you say, look, if I can get it for 10%, I'm not going to you because I can get it 10% cheaper. The contract doesn't apply. And so I think we need to start looking at how we can get better deals. And I think that's just rethinking the way we do government. The other thing that's happened is there's been a cost of government commission. They've made a lot of great recommendations. We should take a look at some of those recommendations and put those into place.
So public health and safety, what does that mean to you?
So public health and safety, well, there's a couple of things there. Health and safety is the physical safety and health, physical health, but it's also our economic health and safety. We need an economically vibrant community to have safe health and safety communities. That is the foundation, is an economically vibrant community. So people have jobs that they can put food on their table. There's affordable housing. They're not going to be hampered by government, rather government helping them make things happen, having help do it in a fast way, an effective and efficient way. That is a healthy and safe community as well. And I think that's what we really need to do in this government, is make sure that we're doing things in a way that is effective, efficient, and increasing the economic vibrancy of our island.
Thank you. And economic vibrancy, can you go into a little more detail about what you mean by economic vibrancy?
Okay, so an economically vibrant community, again, is a community that has good jobs, that allows the workers to put food on the tables. It is a community that has a housing that is affordable. Now, I have 3 kids that are kind of around your age, and they're living off island because there's really no jobs for them here that they're going to be able to afford to buy their own houses. And so they have good jobs on the mainland. My son's working for NASA. My daughter's in New York representing the state of Hawaii, and I have another daughter in Las Vegas. So having a community where those kids can come back, kids like friends of yours, I know a lot of them are gone because I say that our number one export is our bright kids.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but we have to make it, this is a great place to live. And so if they can come back, they can have good jobs, they can have jobs that allow them to put food on their tables, allow them to buy houses. You have a sustainable community, have communities with activities for keiki and kupuna. That's an economically vibrant community, one that has infrastructure. An infrastructure that works, that's an economically vibrant community. There's so many things that need to be fixed here that we can't just keep on kicking the can down the road.
So I definitely want to live in an economically vibrant community.
Yes.
So thank you for spearheading that.
Thank you.
So Mitch, how would you handle disaster response, not just to this pandemic, but to earthquakes, tsunami, lava? Are there any ideas you have to improve our civil defense?
We have a very good civil defense system. We've gone through a couple of different models in the last several years. As a prosecuting attorney, I sit on the cabinet, and so I've been going down to civil defense. One of the things I think we really need to do is we need to do a better job of communicating and getting our community involved. We have a lot of really good community groups. There's a group called VOAD, that works in volunteers. We have CERT teams, the Citizens Emergency Response Teams. We have neighborhood watches. We have various people that want to do things. We have the faith leaders. I talked about the faith leaders a little bit earlier. When we brought those faith leaders together, several faiths, all different faiths, working together to solve all sorts of problems. They would have meetings once a week during the earthquake disaster. And I'd be going to their meetings, and I'd go to civil defense. And what I saw was the community was able to do amazing things with very little problems. On the other side, I would see things happening at civil defense, and there was a lot of, moving around, and there's frustration. With the communities, I think the biggest problems that we were having was we'd have things like faith-based was working on entertainment, and then we'd have a government agency saying, oh, that's our kuleana, we should be doing that. And so, okay, fine, we'll give that over to you guys, and then the entertainment started going down. We had childcare that the faith-based was working on, so that was working really well. And then Red Cross came and said, oh, that's our kuleana. And it was more about, oh, this is our turf and we have to do things, versus let's get this done and let's make this the best that we can.
Yeah.
And the lesson there is there's a lot of people that want to be involved. Get them involved. They have great ideas, and a lot of those things don't cost us a lot of money. The biggest thing that they were looking for, it was the county to thank them for the efforts that they were doing. And so I think that's a big thing that we need to do. We have people that were frustrated with the communication that was going out. I understand both sides on the communication, and we could have probably done a little bit better job. That being said, I saw what was going on, and I saw they were also trying to do the best they could under the situation that they were going through.
Thank you. So the Big Island is big.
Yes, it's very big.
Very big. It's larger than Rhode Island and Delaware combined. What will you do to make sure everyone has access to you and your team?
This is a talk I have often when I go to Kona, because this is the island of Hawaii and not the island of Hilo. And other mayors in the past have had regular office hours on the other side. Billy Kenoi did that. I think that was a really good idea. I think the mayor has to be on the other side of the island, on both sides of the island, all sides of the island. But more than that, I think the divisions heads have to also be there on a regular basis. I think that's really important, and I think the community expects that.
What about Ka'u and Kohala?
Absolutely. Both of those places, Kohala, I think, is probably one of my favorite places on the island. I'll just say that. And I've done a lot of work in Ka'u. Some of our best ideas have actually come from Ka'u. I'll mention one because I know your dad and everything. We have an agricultural investigator program because we were working with coffee farmers in Ka'u, and it came up at one of the meetings that we should have something like that. And so everybody should have a voice, and everybody should have, be able to put ideas in.
So Mitch, speaking of doing things differently, let's talk about our island's waste management resources. Landfills. We had two, but now we only have one. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, first off, we should have been acting earlier on this, and now we're forced to truck rubbish over to the Kona side of the island, which is terrible for our infrastructure, which is terrible for our environment, the carbon footprint there. I think one of the first things that is going to happen, if nothing happens between now and the next mayor taking over, is we're going to have to put out a request for proposals for a better solution than hauling that rubbish, because that is the worst solution. We may have to come up with a temporary solution that may not be the best solution, but something that gets us through a point where we're not hauling rubbish. It could be waste to energy. That could be, there's a whole bunch of ideas, smart people that have different thoughts of this. I think we put the request for proposal, let those ideas come in. One of the things that we're talking about now is also recycling. We had recycling programs, and it's become expensive. We have things like cardboard. Cardboard could be used in agriculture. You can put it over rocks, it becomes soil, it becomes mulch. At our office, I take all of our shredded paper, a lot of our shredded paper, and I put it over the places that used to be full with weeds, acts as mulch. It looks like I have snow under palm trees. That's a whole different thing. But I've never seen us ask people, hey, would you like to use this for this purpose? We just did a competition. There's a group that I help out called Next Tech. I sit on the board for that, and have some great people that are doing great work outside, that have really worked well with these kids. We had a competition called the Fish Tank, and the Fish Tank kind of works like the Shark Tank, but we have high school and middle school kids coming up with ideas on what to do with our recycling. And one of the ideas I saw, there's some really great ideas. One of the ideas was to take the plastic and make it into blocks, like hard blocks of things. And you can use those blocks for various different things.
Yeah.
There's things like Trex, wood that they use for decking and stuff like that. But those blocks can be used to create something different than waste that's going into our landfill. And I just think, if we have the ability to do that, you put that idea out, what could be used, what could you use these blocks to make? Or what can you use this compressed plastic to make? We need to think differently than we've been thinking. If we can't ship it out someplace, maybe we create it into something else that can be used here. A lot of people don't realize this, but on this island, believe it or not, we have the best recycling program in the United States at PTA. Bahakaloa Training, they recycle about 70% of everything that goes in to the landfill. The guy, Adam Sharf up there, is a genius. There's ideas that we should be taking from up there and putting down here. One of the things that happened recently when we couldn't find a vendor to take our plastics and stuff, we stopped recycling. And my problem with that is a lot of people gained like muscle memory of sorting, and we're going to get back to there at some point, but getting people trained on how to sort is going to take us time to do. So
Yeah.
I think we really need to start looking and thinking outside the box, thinking differently on how you handle these kinds of problems. And that's a perfect example. The big problem that's going to come up very soon is our wastewater treatment on the Kona side. There was a recent U.S. Supreme Court case against the treatment facility on Maui, but we have the same problem on the Kona side. And that's something that we don't want to kick down the road for many years, because that's another $100 million project to fix.
Well, maybe we have to throw an idea out to the fish tank and see if they come up with anything.
That's a great idea. It's amazing, putting the ideas out to the kids, brilliant ideas that they came up with.
Yeah.
And, it just goes to show, it doesn't matter how old, how long you've been in things, when a new idea comes out, it's a new idea for everybody.
That's great. So, Mitch, you mentioned in an article with the Star Advertiser back in December 2019 that you wanted to bring the right people to the table. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Sure. There's a book, and I think the writer is Jim Collins, From Good to Great. And what he says is, good is the enemy of great. And the other thing that I remember from that book is the way you go from good to great is you make sure you have the right people in the right seats on the bus. And so when you have your division heads, you can have great people, but if they don't work together well, you're not going to get a great product. And if you don't allow them the opportunity to do their jobs and make their own decisions, then you may not get the best product. So putting the right people together is going to be key for any person taking over this county, because right now there's issues that most people are aware of that are preventing us from being great and having an efficient and effective government.
Thank you. Mitch, the next question comes from Nicole Badero. Assuming you win the race for mayor, what will be one of the first areas of business you focus on, and why?
Okay, so one of the first things is making sure, like we just talked about, having the right people in the right places on the bus, having the right leadership there. I think one of the things that we're going to need to look at is how we're doing with our rubbish, our landfills and things like that.
Absolutely.
So I probably put out a RFP like we talked about. I think the other thing is to focus on our permitting process, because the permitting process right now can be cumbersome, it can be confusing. I think the way we're reviewing things is we're using the most restrictive versus a black and white approach. And so we can have a different decision from Kona to Hilo. And that is something that we're going to need to have in place so business can start operating effectively and efficiently, and we're moving projects and not having to wait for projects. And I can tell you there's a lot of people that are frustrated with the time that it takes to get a permit through. It shouldn't take that long to get through. And I think that's really, when you talk about having the right people in the right places, have the direction set on how we're going to be interpreting these rules.
Wow, well, I know that that's going to be music to many people's ears on this island.
Thanks.
So, Mitch, if you lose the race for mayor, what will you do for work?
I really haven't considered about losing for mayor, but I hear there's this really great eco tour place that I may be able to be a tour guide again.
You're hired.
Oh, cool.
Great. And our final question for today, and one that people really want to know, are you a dog or cat man?
I love dogs.
Oh.
So, at the prosecutor's office, we had Faith, our courthouse dog. And so it was the first dog that we had in our office, and she took care of kids who are victims of crimes and traumatic incidences and other victims and witnesses. And so definitely a dog person.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today with us. Thank
you so much, Kea. I had a good time. Hopefully you had too.
I did too.
Okay.
We know there are a lot of questions that didn't get answered today. So if you have any questions for Mitch Roth, please visit www.mitchroth.org. Under the section Q&A, make sure to join Mitch and Pomai every Thursday night at 6 p.m. on Facebook and Instagram.